"Go and make disciples of all nations," and so they did. Peter was the first bishop of Rome. He instituted Matthias, the 12th apostle. He performed miracles. He started the church in Antioch, where he appointed Evaristus as successor. He moved to Rome as Jesus' rock and presided the church in its early days. He participated of the Council of Jerusalem, the first council of the church, where it was decided how Gentiles would deal with the Abrahamic law. The Bible shows us how Peter repeated the sacraments of Jesus, and he evoked to the Holy Spirit very constantly. Peter's primacy over the rest of the apostles was primordial since the early days of the church, and it was recognized by Paul and all of the church's followers. He chose Linus as his successor in Rome, and he was crucified upside down, becoming a martyr. Linus had to deal with the persecution of Christianity in the Roman Empire during the rule of Nero. He instituted the first 15 bishops of Italy. He accompanied St. Paul until his death. From him, Linus learned about theology, and Linus also took from Paul the tradition of making women wear veils at church and helped to spread it. During his papacy, the evangelists Mark and Luke were killed. He became a martyr too, and his remains were buried next to Peter in the Vatican Hills. Anacletus, also known as Cletus, was the one who divided Rome into 25 parishes and ordained several priests during his reign. His origins are disputed, but he could have been the first Greek to become pope despite being born in Italy. He started building the sepulchre for the bishops of Rome, which is now the underground of the Vatican City. He established the rules for the consecration of future bishops, and after his violent death, he was finally buried next to Linus and Peter. Clement was the last Roman pope who met the apostles. Ordained by Peter himself and friends with Paul, he had declined the position of bishop twice and finally took it after Cletus' death. As pope, he had to combat the first heresy of Gnosticism. In the year 95, he sent a letter to the Greek city of Corinth, reminding the priests to stay loyal to the teachings of the apostles. He, Ignatius of Antioch, and Polycarp, bishop of Smyrna, are regarded as the apostolic fathers because of their great work spreading Christian theology and preserving the apostles' legacy. Evaristus was the pope of the end of the apostolic age because John was the last apostle alive during his papacy. John instructed St. Ignatius, and Peter instituted him as bishop of Antioch. St. Ignatius and St. Evaristus were contemporary bishops, as well as Simeon, who was the second bishop of Jerusalem after James the Lesser, and he was also appointed by Peter. Simeon would also die during Evaristus' papacy. The bishop of Alexandria, Kedron, was the last bishop to be baptized by Mark the Evangelist. Plutarch and the previous bishops of Constantinople since the times of Onesimus had also been appointed by St. Ignatius, which was a symbol of a new generation of bishops in the church. Pope Alexander I introduced the narration of the Last Supper to the Eucharist. He is responsible for tons of conversions, such as the Roman governor Hyginus, altogether with his servants. He introduced the mixing of water with wine in the Eucharist. He spread the tradition of the holy water, and by the end of his papacy, St. Ignatius of Antioch wrote a letter praising Alexander for preserving the dignity of the Roman Church. He was beheaded by the Roman Empire, but he managed to convert his jailer and his jailer's daughter before being executed. Sixtus I was a very active pope in defining the Roman liturgy. He introduced the Sanctus Prayer to the Mass. He decreed that only priests could touch the chalice. He established protocols of assigning bishops to their diocese, requiring them to have an apostolic letter on their return after meeting with the Pope, to assure that they remain bishops. Basically, he strengthened the papal authority. During his papacy, Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, and as we can see, Jerusalem changed bishops plenty of times during his papacy because of the persecution and executions. Telesphorus is attributed the start of the Christmas midnight masses and established the 7-week Lent. He also introduced the chant of Gloria in Excelsis Deo to the Mass. Telesphorus was the first pope who celebrated Easter on Sunday rather than the Jewish Passover, that could be any day of the week, because of the lunar calendar. However, Telesphorus did not enforce this practice, and therefore some Christian communities had variations on their celebration. Pope Saint Hyginus was the first pope to require consecration of churches as places of worship. Hyginus confronted prominent heretics in Rome such as Valentinus and Cerdan, especially the second one, who was readmitted in the church but then fell into heresy again. This led Hyginus to create tougher rules in the structure of the church hierarchy. Pope Pius I was born in northern Italy, and it is presumed that he and his brother were slaves from a young age. He is the pope who definitely mandated Easter to be celebrated exclusively on Sundays. He is said to have built the Santa Prudencia, one of the oldest churches in Rome. He excommunicated Valentinus, Cerdan, and Marcion, and all of those who followed their heresies. It is remarkable that all of these Gnostics, heretics, and all their currents came from Africa and Asia, and rather than confronting their local bishops, they just set off to Rome. Pius's role in solving the controversy of the 2nd century was crucial to the destiny of Christianity.